Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Shaw will serve as chaplain of the day. Representative Shaw, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let us pray. God, we thank you so much for the good graces of this day. We thank you that you blessed us to get up and start this day with right minds. And most of all, God, the good graces that you have developed on us. Now today, we make this request from you. Teach us to pray as you taught your disciples. And you said to them, when you pray, say, Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And today, Lord, we pray that you'll get the glory and that your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then, God, we request from you again that you would give us the strength, the wherewithal, the wisdom to draw from what you've already put in us. We don't need to ask you for love. We already have it. Just give us the wisdom to draw from that. Give us the wisdom to have joy, peace, and love, all of the great things that you've blessed us with. We just ask, God, now that you allow us to receive it back. In Jesus' name, we pray and believe it's done because we ask it of you. Amen.
Representative Shaw will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Salute, pledge. I pledge an allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Well, roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 98 members present.
Let the journal reflect Representative Harris is excused. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative McKenzie. You're recognized in the well.
He's on his way, Mr. Speaker. He's going to introduce us.
Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Love and I request the Sergeant at Arms to escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well. Representative McKenzie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is my honor and pleasure to present to some and introduce the others just an outstanding collection of talented musicians. Fisk University, my alma mater, over 150 years ago, sent the Fisk Jubilee Singers out into the world, where they performed in front of kings and queens. The Queen of England was so enamored with Fisk Jubilee Singers that she made a significant donation toward the erection of Jubilee Hall. This rendition of the Fisk Jubilee Singers is the first with a new permanent director. Dr. Paul T. Kwame was a longtime director. He was in grad school during my time here. And last time I saw him was here in this chamber. He was getting an award in the Senate and brought Jubilee Singers with him. He was on a cane at the time. but he refused to walk into the chamber without a cane. That just shows the pride that he had for his job and his passion, his career. So without any other further ado, I introduce to you all the Fisk Jubilee Singers.
I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. Oh, you brought me me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You brought me from a mighty long way. Mighty long way. You took my mother, you took my father, you took my sister, my brother. Thank you, Lord. You brought me from a mighty long way. Mighty long way. Sister, you've been the father of all my own and all. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, my Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Be my keeper, day by day. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Thank you, Jesus. You are my Jesus. I thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You know you brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Be my keeper, day by day. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. You brought me, yes, you brought me from a mighty long way. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. Brought me from a mighty long way. You brought me from a mighty long way. Yes, you brought me from a mighty. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus. I thank you, Lord.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a proud Fisk graduate, Justin Jones, the class of 2017. I'd like to turn it over to Reverend Love.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Speaker. And thank you, Representative McKenzie. It's a wonderful university to have in your district, Fisk University, and I'll be forever grateful to Fisk. Gave me my father his first job teaching there, and so Fisk always holds a special place in my heart. I want you to know that. So again, Representative Jones, Representative McKenzie, as graduates, me having the school in my district means so much to have them here this morning. And I think we're going to invite you down for a picture.
Representative Chisholm, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, there's a proverb that says, a generous person shall prosper, for the one that gives water can receive water. The person that I'm about to introduce to you all today has carried water in this state, in this country, for a mighty long time. The person I'm about to introduce has been a mentor to many of us, has been the voice of reason in this chamber during times where it got quite contentious. The person that I'm about to introduce to you is a pastor who's given some of the most riveting speeches that I've ever heard, has led the best Bible study that I've ever went to. This person is somebody that I've looked up to ever since I got elected. This man is a man. This man is a righteous man. This man is a leader. This man is a person who has served at a high level. This man serves currently as the senior advisor to our governor and has been a senior advisor to this body. Allow me to introduce you all to the man, the myth, the legend, John DeBerry, ladies and gentlemen.
Good morning. We're here today because we're celebrating someone who gave so much to this country, an individual who stood at a time when many men were failing to stand, who spoke when there were those who refused to speak, who fought when there are those who had capitulated and compromised and refused to fight. Dr. King believed that rights and privileges and the protection of the Constitution were first bequeathed to every American by their Creator, their God and their Father in heaven. Dr. King was a conservative Baptist minister, conservative in the scriptures, who believed that God created man in his own image, and that believed that man was supposed to stand and live in that image that he was taught from the scriptures. We cannot celebrate Dr. King without celebrating what he believed and what he stood for. And oftentimes, as we deal with the legends and the myths of Dr. King, we forget that that was a human being, a man with flaws and faults and failures, just like every last one of us. But a man who set aside his fears. And as I watched him on the last speech that he made, a man that while his voice, that strong baritone voice, may have trembled just a little bit, the words that he spoke that night made an impression on me as a young man and many and all of the men that are standing here today. I want you to know that there have been many men and women who have served on this floor for over 40, almost 50 years. Men and women who sat on this floor. The Black Caucus was created in here. Many of the rules and ethics were created in here. African Americans sat beside those who did not necessarily look like them and worked out compromises and bills that made the state of Tennessee strong. One of the things that Tennessee could always brag about was the fact that we had men and women who built bridges. Larry Miller, who stands here behind me, has served longer than anybody on this floor. He is one who has come, has fought, has stood, has chaired a committee, and not just him, but many others who we forget their names, who fought on this floor, who stood on this floor and made bills and speeches and did wonderful things that made the state of Tennessee become a better place. White men, white women, black women worked together, and I sat on this floor for 26 years. And I saw people stand together That wasn't many times. There were times when we fought, but then we would fight and it wasn't personal, and we would go and sit down and have dinner together because our hearts were right, because we loved the state of Tennessee. Dr. King loved this nation. And sometimes we need to be reminded of the fact that we are all Americans. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. stood for patriotism in its truest sense. He stood for faith in God, justice, the dignity of brotherhood as an American, our mutual responsibility to have her, our nation, live up to the promises of his founding generation. Dr. King skillfully, and I remember hearing him speak on many occasions, and on a few occasions as a young man with the Memphis 13 and Dr. Kyle and many of the others who were around him all the time, heard him interweave the founding ideas and principles of this nation into an effort to secure those rights, blessings for Blacks and disadvantaged citizens who at that time were denied what men and women of color merited and deserved because of their sacrifice, because of their contribution since the beginning of this republic. I remember walking with my father when we turned the corner there in Memphis in the march, a few rows behind Dr. King. And someone introduced me one time as civil rights hero. I want you to understand something, my brothers and my sisters. I was not a hero. I was a scared kid holding on to my daddy's britches. And as my daddy, I saw on his face, I did not see fear on that Korean War era veteran's face. I did not see a man who was ready to turn and run as a teenager. I was ready to run. But I looked at his face and I found courage, not just from him, but from men and women, Black and white, Jew and Gentile, of all religions and ethnicities, who stood together for what had to happen in this nation, knowing that America had to change and they were going to be the change agents. My father's face. My father's face showed a courage that encouraged me. And that generation was a wonderful generation. My father in 1968, when he said it is time to integrate the schools, I had gone to a wonderful school called Central High School, which was an all-Black school. But there were so many things that they were not given. And my father said, my children are going to have all the advantages and we're going to open the door for the other children. And in 1968, he sent us to Alamo High School in Crockett County, where we had moved from Memphis. I asked my father, what do I do? What do I do when I go to school with these white children? My daddy said, you go to school. And I said, my 5 brothers and sisters are looking at me, the eldest, and want me to talk to the man. And I said, Daddy, what do we do when we go to that school? He said, you go to school. And after I had inquired a couple of times, I finally got on his nerves. He called me Nick. He said, Nick, you go to school. And he said something that Dr. King's father told him. He said, you don't scratch your head when it ain't itching. You don't grin when it ain't funny. He said, you be a man. He said, if you stand up as a man, you give respect, you will receive respect. That's what I did at that school. And many of those young men and women are my friends to this day, and they come to Capitol Hill to check on me 50 years later after integration. And that next year, the schools integrated with no problem because folks went where they chose to go. Many of them came to Alamo High, and integration in Crockett County had absolutely no problem at all. Dr. King loved this country. He loved it. And he made a claim to the blessings, the rights, the privileges, not as beggars. Those men and women that day in Memphis didn't come with their hat in their hand as beggars and undeserving and interlopers. They came as veterans, as business owners, as mothers, as fathers, as husbands, as wives, as ministers, as professors, as men and women of substance who had given to this country as their ancestors had from the very beginning of the thought of independence of America. And when they walked that day, I, as a young man, I found the courage and the strength to do what I had to do for the rest of my life, looking at the face of my father. When we went to that school, my daddy said this to me. When I came home one day complaining about something at the school, he took his glasses off. He looked me dead in the eye and he said to me, Nick, you can't stop being colored, so you may as well stop being scared. And on that day, I will take nothing for the fact that I did drink out of the colored water fountain, as some of my companions up here in this well who are old enough also did. I did ride on the back of the bus. I did go to the zoo on Tuesday, which was colored day. I did sit in the balcony of the Orpheum where colored people were supposed to sit. I would take nothing for those experiences because I know where we have come from. I know the advancements that we have made. I know that we are a better nation. I know that we are a better people. I know we still got our fears, our faults, our failures, our flaws, our flops, but we try and struggle to live our faith. And my brothers and sisters, if we live our faith, if we stop trying to understand everything and simply trust God, as the Apostle Paul said one time, we walk by faith and not by sight. The enemy is always going to show you something to be angry about. The enemy is always going to show you something to be upset about. The enemy is always going to have a mix of words as we deal with words and philosophies and ideologies and theologies. But I want you to know that day I saw those men and women, they weren't facing words, they were facing dogs. They were facing billy clubs. They were facing a fire hose from a fire truck that I saw push a woman all the way across the street and almost undress that poor woman from the force of that fire hose. Those men and women showed courage in the face of real danger, not just talk, but real danger. And they stood, and they did not flinch, and they did not compromise. I saw them with my own eyes, join their arms and said, ain't nobody, help me brothers, gonna turn me around. I saw them do that. And what I'm saying to y'all on this floor, that the people of this nation, the people of the state of Tennessee, we didn't, in my generation, we didn't read this stuff in a book. We lived this stuff. We didn't see this stuff in pictures. I saw it in reality. We don't read about the dogs, we heard them snarl. And I want you to understand, all they did was encourage us to be strong, to be smart, and to succeed. Frederick Douglass one time said, education makes a man unfit to be a slave. When we educate our children, when we educate ourselves, we are unfit to be a slave to immorality, a slave to materialism and worldliness, a slave to debauchery, a slave to all the various ideologies and philosophies that tear us apart and make us fight one another every day. We look back at those men, Dr. King, and I can remember listening to that speech when that good man said, I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. And Lord have mercy, if God could let him and my father and others of that tremendous generation come back and look at us today. those who had that dream, that we would be able to sit down and talk to each other and reason together and compromise and do those things that are right. I have a dream, he says, that my little children will one day be judged by the content of their character and not the color of their skin. At some point, we got to stop dealing with every issue as though it is a race issue. We've got to disagree without becoming disagreeable. We've got to make our stand with respect for the other man's stand. We've got to give our opinion while listening to the other man's opinion. And then when everybody has had their say, nobody just gets their way, and everybody builds a bridge that is good for the people of the state of Tennessee. When you're born in this world, you look like your parents. Your mama, daddy, grandmama, granddaddy, maybe an uncle or aunt or brother or sister. When we're born in this world, we look like our parents. When we leave this world, we look like our choices. America used to look like its parents, used to look like the founding fathers, black and white, those of ethnicities from all over the world who had escaped the monarchies and tyranny of Europe and other places and come here with a faith saying we will start a country where we, the people, make the decisions. We used to look like our parents, but now we're beginning to look like our choices. Our choice to hate, our choice to be divided, our choice to be belligerent, our choice to not be understanding, our choice to not build brotherhood. Martin Luther King said, we will live together as brothers, or we will die and perish together as fools. We have to make that decision. Let me leave you with this. An eagle is a bird respected in the state of Tennessee because it's indigenous to our beautiful state, this beautiful, majestic bird. When he spreads his wings out, it's 6, 7, and 8 feet wide of this beautiful bird that God created. There's another bird God created. It's a raven. And a raven with big feet and long claws would get right on the back of the scruff of the neck of the eagle. And he digs his claws in deep into that eagle's feathers and he holds tight. He holds tight. He holds tight. And he pecks. He pecks on the back of the eagle's head. He can't defeat the eagle, but he pecks and he pecks and he pecks on the back of the eagle's neck. And the eagle is aggravated and frustrated. He flies, he flips, he turns, he does everything he can do. But he cannot shake that raven off because his claws, those talons, are so deep in his feathers. But God created that eagle. And that eagle spreads those 6, 7, 8 foot wings. And he looks to the heavens and he begins to soar. And he soars higher and higher and higher and higher. And he soars higher and higher. And at some point, that eagle has gone so high in his soaring that the raven, who cannot compete, loses consciousness and falls off of his back because he soared. When the pecking and aggravation continues, when the pecking and aggravation gets on your nerves, when the pecking and aggravation is causing division and belligerence and causing us to have all types of ill feelings, that's when you soar. That's when you soar. That's when you show the best of yourself, the strongest of yourself. That's when you show brotherhood and sisterhood and faith and strength. That's when you show you are God's children and you soar. And when you soar, you watch those who are just pecking. You watch them fall away. Thank you.
Representative Hardaway.
I got special, I want Joe up. First of all, thank you, Reverend Dr. John DeBerry. I've asked Joe Towns to stand here along with John DeBerry because as John was talking about history and how some of us didn't have to read it in the history books, but were there to experience it, it hit me that we're down to just a few who can tell the story because they were there. Joe Towns can tell the story because he was there. John DeBerry can tell the story because he was there. I can tell the story because like John DeBerry, like Joe Towns, I was there in 1968, 13 years old. I know what tear gas is like. I know what a bayonet looks like up close. I also know what bricks and bottles look like. I know the story firsthand. Joe Towns knows the story firsthand. John reminded me of something else when he mentioned the Memphis 13. Those were those small, tiny children who integrated the, at that time, Memphis city schools. It reminded me of their dad and his influence with Dr. King, and the fact that on that date, that fateful date, 1968, April 4th, Dr. King stood on the balcony talking about his dinner plans at Reverend Billy Cowell's home. You know, we don't have to read it in the books because we were there. We know the people, we know the players, we know the places. And I appreciate, John, that you were able to bring it all into focus, especially about the eagle soaring. Because there's a lot of pecking at times, but if you're going to be that eagle, you're going to have to bear it, continue to soar higher and higher until that raven falls off. So I'm going to ask all of my colleagues and those who are listening, if you don't take anything else away from John DeBerry's presentation today, remember that it's soaring that frees you from the pecking and the pettiness and the agitation. It's soaring, it's continuing to fly higher and higher using your God-given abilities, your talents, which, as we say in the church, on loan from God. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it back to you, sir. You know,
I wasn't quick enough.
it's hard to have any suitable words after John DeBerry, but I can tell you the one guy that I think he'll agree that can follow him would be Dr. King. And there is a quote from Dr. King that I'd like to leave you with so that perhaps today or tomorrow, when you have time to contemplate and think about it, you might end up being a better person. You might end up being a better person. And it's just a couple of sentences, but he was so prophetic when he asked for Precious Lord to be played that night. He insisted, he wanted it badly. But the last part of his speech, when he says, we've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now
because I've been to the mountaintop. We all have some difficult days ahead, but Dr. King was willing to put it all on the line. He knew, he was prophetic. He knew that the end was near for him, but he also knew that the baton had to be passed so the race could still be won. Mr. Chairman.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you all. Thank you all for your embracing this day. This is a significant day, as Dr. King did die in this great state in Memphis, Tennessee, in 1968. So thank you, Speaker. Would you mind coming down and take a picture?
Yeah, I think they were going to say Representative Towns may say a few words. Representative Towns, is that what Representative Hardaway said? No. All right, I was just making sure he said his name. All right, very good. Representative Darby, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the Sergeant at Arms escort our guests into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well. Representative Darby, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I request that the clerk read the proclamation.
Mr. Clerk, read the proclamation.
Whereas we are pleased to especially recognize those outstanding young women of this state whose poise, admirable personality traits, and beauty, both inner and outer, make them role models among their peers. And whereas 5 such outstanding young women from Henry County include Abby Smith, who was named 2024 Hostess Princess, and Ann Claire Collins, Kenan Wilson, Taylor Grace French, and McKenna Thrower, who were selected as members of the 2024 Hostess Princess Court in honor of the festivities of the 71st Annual World's Biggest Fish Fry, sponsored by the Paris Henry County JCs in Paris, Tennessee. And whereas for over half a century, the world's biggest fish fry has brought acclaim and recognition to Paris, this renowned festival features a full week of activities for all ages and is conducted for members of the community and visitors alike to enjoy. And whereas these young ladies' beauty, grace, drive, and determination are sources of pride for their parents, their families, and their communities, and bode well for their future success. And whereas it is fitting that we specially recognize and honor the Hostess Princess and her court, 5 of Tennessee's most promising young women. Now, therefore, Cameron Sexton, Speaker of the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the state of Tennessee, at the request of and in conjunction with Representative Tandy Darby, do hereby proclaim that we honor and congratulate Abby Smith on being named 2024 Hostess Princess of the 71st Annual World's Biggest Fish Fry in Paris, Tennessee. Likewise, we honor Ann Claire Collins, Kenan Wilson, Taylor Grace French, and McKenna Thrower on being named to the 2024 Hostess Princess Court and extend to these exceptional young ladies our best wishes for every success in all their future endeavors.
Representative Darby, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We get to do a lot of neat things here, but welcoming these beautiful women back here to the Capitol from West Tennessee, that's top notch for me. And I want to start. First, I want to thank John Penn Ridgway for bringing them up here, and Mr. John Paul Casey, the general manager of the JCs, that they're putting on the 71st World's Biggest Fish Fry, April the 20th through the 27th. And Mr. Towns, I'm going to give you the best invitation I can give you. All the fish you can eat on me the night of the 27th. So look forward to having y'all. Yeah. I want to introduce our beautiful ladies here with us today. Miss McKenna Thrower, Miss Taylor French, Miss Kennan Wilson, Miss Anna Claire Collins, and our Princess Abby Smith. And Mr. Speaker, if we could I get the princess here to say a few words?
Yes. She's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Hi, I am your 2024 I am your 2024 Hostess Princess, Abby Smith. I would love to welcome you to the world's biggest fish fry. It is filled with so many activities and everybody can enjoy it. Our grand opening parade starts April 26th at 10 a.m. I would love to see you there. If you would like more information, we have booklets to the side of me that we would love to give out to you. Thank you.
Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to get y'all to give a warm welcome here to Mr. John Penn Ridgway. He's the mayor of Henry County. A little bit about his pedigree. We lost his dad here a few weeks ago, Mr. Don Ridgway, that served faithfully here for years. So if you could give a warm welcome here for Mr. John Penn Ridgway.
Told Tandy it's when you give me a mic, that's not a good thing as a public servant. But from one public servant to another, we want to invite you to the world's biggest fish fry. We hope y'all have adjourned sine die. I hope most of y'all do not have opponents that qualify before the deadline today at noon. And we served over 11,000 pounds of catfish last year. We ran out on Saturday night, so we're going to have 12,000 pounds this year. Representative Todd, we want you to come back to your home place, Henry County. You come every year. Representative Martin, expect to see you. I think he stepped out. But I appreciate everything you guys do. Whether you're from rural, urban, R or D, I appreciate what you guys do every day for us and appreciate y'all. My dad loved serving the state of Tennessee. It's a very tough process, but he served the state for 18 years and he served 6 counties in 18 years. And this was a blessing of his life. And I appreciate the honor. And come to Paris. We want to have you. Thank you so much.
Representative Darby.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we invite you here for a picture.
Welcome and honoring Representative Bracken. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, would you stand and join me in honoring a true Tennessee patriot that we lost this week? Tuesday morning, Jud Maeni died of natural causes at his home in Coffee County. Jud served this body for 16 years. I know many of you were colleagues of his. Jud was truly a leader. He was chairman of many committees. He was Speaker Pro Tem. If you knew Jud, you knew his stubbornness, his dedication to his constituents. He was elected county mayor in 2020, and he was bringing such great leadership to our county, and that we sorely needed. And he is just going to be terribly missed. So please join me. His family's hurting. His friends are hurting this week. We take every day. We have experiences like this.
We'll take a moment of silence. Thank you. Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. Today is April 4th, a reminder of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the motel in my district, District 86. But it's also a reminder that it wasn't just the bullet that killed him. It was white supremacy. It was racism that killed him. And I want to say a few quotes here because people mistake the legacy of Dr. King merely as a pacifist and not as someone who was against the empire and against the indignities of this nation. He said, "We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Frankly, I've yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was well timed in the view of those who have not suffered from the disease of segregation." The reality is, Dr. King also mentioned, he spoke about a dream, but the American experience has often been a nightmare. And for many people in our country and in our state today, we have to fight to make sure that the reality of equality is true, and it currently is not.
Representative Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So today, I was wondering, I kind of woke up in a funk today, and I really wasn't sure why I was. Then after listening to everything that's going on today, it didn't hit me, but it hit me why I was in a funk. Today is my mother's birthday, and she passed in 2018. And so I like to, wish her a happy birthday, and I let her know that I'm thinking about her. And today is also, this is not why I'm in a funk, but today is also Representative Kumar's legislative assistant, Colleen Johnson's birthday as well. So I tend to remember people's birthdays that are associated with my mother, because some way they must be special, and I feel like my mother put them in my life for a reason. But thank you for indulging me for this time, and just kind of keep me in your prayer today, because I'm not feeling my best today, but thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night I was messaging with Reverend Dr. Bernice King because we know that today is not a day of celebration, but it's a really heavy day for her family. And I think it's even harder because every year she has to try and resist the whitewashing of her father. And so I just want to read a quote from Dr. King from 1963. He said, "I have been gravely disappointed with the white moderate. The Negro's great stumbling block in his stride toward freedom is not the Ku Klux Klaner, but the white moderate who constantly says, 'I agree with you in the goals you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action.' Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will." Let us not forget that Dr. King was assassinated in 1968 when he was preparing to organize a campaign of mass civil disobedience in Washington, challenging the triple threats of racism, poverty, and militarism. Let's not forget that Dr. King was demonized by a lot of the white folks at the time and told that he was a socialist and was in fact killed by gun violence.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to wish Gabby Carter in the House Clerk's office a happy 23rd birthday. Gabby's a graduate of the University of Tennessee, Knoxville.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I rise to talk about one of our former members that we served with. Many of y'all know Jud Maeni. Let me see about show of hands how many were here when Jud was here. Let me see your hands. Okay. You all know how excellent of a guy Jud was. Jud would pull us together every year. We would all get an opportunity to go up to Tullahoma. He would provide the transportation, the opportunity to go on the base and deal with the activity he had planned for us there. We would fellowship after the fact. Well, many of us got that untimely, that horrible email the other day that he had passed. It was just a young man. He was only 53, I believe. You know, really young man, untimely. The mayor who served and sat right back there with us for a long time. But
All right, thank you. Moment of silence. Everybody, if you please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. Representative Jones.
Thank you. I just wanted to finish my thought that at the time of his assassination, 75% of Americans disapproved of MLK as he spoke out against the war in Vietnam and economic disparity. In fact, Dr. King was kicked out of the Baptist convention. He had to create a whole new progressive Baptist convention because they thought he was too radical. And so let us say today, there's a scripture in the Bible that says, woe to you who build tombs for prophets your ancestors killed. If you were fighting for racial justice, if you're not standing up against militarism, if you're not fighting for the poor and dispossessed, don't act like you love Dr. King. Be consistent. And it is shameful. And Bernice King continues to tell us her father's last sermon was that he was fearful. He was preparing to give a sermon saying why America may go to hell. Because he said, I'm fearful that I'm integrating my people into a burning house. That was his view of America. And so let us honor the radical king, the prophet of justice, the one killed by empire on April 4th, 1968 in this state.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Orders of the day, please.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to Order number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory and memorializing.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory and memorializing line on this be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to Order number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions line over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that Senate bills 191, 898, 1,266, 1,917, 2004, 2063, 2,127, 2,230, 2,270, 2,315, 2,321, 2,322, 2,367, 2,501, 2,528, 2,774, 2,879, and 2,907 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of the companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration, petitions, memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We pass to the consent calendar on third and final consideration. Keep with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? Seeing none, we're voting. All the members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? I'm voting. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare consent calendar passed without objection. Most readings here is tabled. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to take up item number 17 at this time, SJR number 870.
Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk, call it first bill.
Senate Joint Resolution 870 by Chairman Todd and others, a resolution expressing support for the state of Israel and the Israeli people and condemning the violent events of October 7th, 2023.
Representative Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to concur in SJR 870.
Chairman Todd moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 870, Department Second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like the clerk to read this resolution, please.
Mr. Clerk, please read the resolution.
A resolution expressing support for the state of Israel and the Israeli people and condemning the violent events of October 7th, 2023. Whereas the sovereign and independent nation of Israel was established on May 14th, 1948, and was immediately recognized by the United States of America, leading to the establishment of full diplomatic relations between our two nations. And whereas demonstrating unwavering resilience, the state of Israel has repeatedly been forced to defend itself and its people, surrounded by a hostile environment and constant threats. And whereas the state of Israel has one of the world's leading technological industries, is a pioneer in research and development in the fields of energy and medicine, and has long been a valued trading partner with the state of Tennessee. And whereas on October 7th, 2023, Tennesseans alongside the people around the world were horrified by the violent terrorist attacks launched against the Jewish people and the state of Israel, and claimed the lives of more than 1,200 individuals in the initial attack. And whereas following the attack, Hamas took hostage more than 240 Israeli and other foreign nationals, many of whom are still being held captive in Gaza. And whereas the state of Tennessee is an unequivocal supporter of the state of Israel and its right to exist and to defend itself against terror and threats to the security of its people. And whereas our great state wishes to reiterate its unwavering commitment to the state of Israel by reaffirming our partnership of more than 75 years with Israel and the Jewish people, and our shared commitment to the advancement of democratic values, cultural ties, and the desire for peace among all people of all nations. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that the members of this General Assembly reaffirm our support for all people of the state of Israel and express our hope that the state of Israel and its neighbors can live in freedom and peace with mutual recognition of each other's dignity and autonomy. Be it further resolved that the members of this General Assembly offer heartfelt condolences to all the victims of the attacks, as well as their families and communities. Be it further resolved that this General Assembly condemns the terrorist actions that began on October 7th, 2023 against the state of Israel and the Jewish people. Be it further resolved that this General Assembly recognizes and reaffirms the state of Tennessee's support and reverence for the resilience of the Israeli people.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I really appreciate my colleagues standing with me here in the well. I appreciate all those that have signed on as co-sponsors. I appreciate Chairman Sapicki in working with me to craft this in such a way that it could be a bipartisan resolution that would show our strong support for the state of Israel. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Todd renews his motion. Representative Bain.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I revealed last week, I'm probably the only person in this body that has worked for the UN that has perhaps worked in foreign policy. 46,496 children killed, 2 million people displaced, 443 damaged schools, 349 healthcare professionals killed, 300 healthcare facilities destroyed. This conflict has killed more aid workers than have been killed in any country in the last 30 years. 72% of the victims in this war are children and women, with the daily death rate surpassing that of any major conflict in 21st history. In what war can a country turn off another area's lights? Israel is committing genocide funded by the United States, and this resolution condones genocide. Now, let me ask you this. How does this resolution enhance the safety and well-being of Jewish Tennesseans that face tangible material threats of white Christian nationalism and right-wing violence? I worked with my Jewish constituents on a piece of legislation following the October 7th attacks. I showed up to committee. I couldn't get a first or a second while this body passed a resolution honoring Christian Heritage Month for November. We have to be working on legislation that protects our Jewish Tennesseans on the ground from material and tangible threats of extremism. And this resolution does none of that, and I urge the rest of my colleagues to vote against it. Thank you.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Unspeakable, inhumane actions were carried out on the state of Israel on October 7th of last year. Unspeakable actions by an enemy that was not provoked, that was not prodded, but just an outright invasion. And we stand with the country of Israel. They're our friend, they're our ally. Christians and around this world stand with this nation, and we firmly show our support for them. And again, I thank my colleagues for standing with me on this. This is a very serious moment for the state of Israel, and we stand with them 100% from this point forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've been a supporter of Israel, and I am for its continued existence, and I've been a supporter ever since I was aware of this issue as a teenager, and that's over 50 years. I've seen all the wars. I've seen the 67 war, the 73 war, and all the other conflicts, and I will continue to support Israel. However, their reaction to this has been abysmal. My Representative Bain has already mentioned some of the statistics. They are out there killing civilians, hundreds, if not thousands of children. Now, I hope they defeat Hamas. Hamas is a horrible organization, but the majority of the people killed in here are innocent civilians. And I will have to vote against this simply because the resolution as written is incomplete. It only talks about one aspect. It doesn't talk about the aspect of the killing of innocent people out there. And I would hope that Israel will change its policies, maybe with a change of prime ministers, where they're supporting not only their own country and their people, but to establish friendly relations with their neighbors, those people around them. Because right now, I think they're not just hurting themselves and they're hurting the Palestinian people, but they're creating radical individuals who will serve to cause more wars in the future. Thank you.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Move previous question.
Previous question been called. There's objection. There's objection. We're on the board. Representative, you need to stop. You need to stop. We're on the board. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye. Those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk. Oh. Mr. Clerk. There we go. Please take the vote.
Aye, 73, 24 nays, one present not voted.
Previous question prevails. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Joint Resolution 870, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 76, 10 nay, 11 present not voting.
Senate Joint Resolution 870 and receive the constitutional majority. I hereby declare concurred in without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, brings the body back to item 1, House Bill 1969 by Representative Jernigan relative to carbon monoxide alarms. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Jernigan, you're recognized.
Excuse me.
Minister Sergeant of Arms, can you please remove the lady behind the board in the black for yelling out and disrupting proceedings? Thank you. Representative Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2066.
Representative Jernigan moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2066. Properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Jernigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of Senate Bill 266 on third and final consideration.
Representative Jernigan moves passage of Senate Bill 2066 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Jernigan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, after working with the Department of Commerce and Insurance, Department of Human Services, as well as the State Fire Marshal's Office, this bill's amendment will align with the 2021 International Building Code and International Fire Code requirements on carbon monoxide alarms in daycares. It will require each daycare agency to have a carbon monoxide alarm in every room where child care is provided for children. It establishes each day a violation occurs, constitutes a separate Class C misdemeanor, which is the same as not having a fire alarm. Last, sir, I will add that carbon monoxide alarms cost anywhere between $10 and $15. Mr. Chairman, I'm answering any questions or renew my motion.
Representative Jernigan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Jernigan, is this your last bill?
Representative Jernigan.
It is not.
Representative Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then I will wait until your last bill.
Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2066, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Is any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 2066, having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call the next bill. Oh. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2472 by Representative Raper relative to school employees.
Representative Raper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2472 on third and final consideration.
Representative Raper moves passage. Following second, Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Representative White moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Proper motion, probably seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of House Amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. It is adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Raper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill establishes a set of guidelines that shall take place if a student physically assaults a school employee. The physical assault is defined in TCA 39-13-101. We have several school employees assaulted each year, which results in fear of returning to work. Many times they end up leaving the profession altogether. Much of the language of this was adopted by Williamson County School System. A student would be suspended from the school where they are enrolled for the period of time specified by the principal teacher, or assistant principal. This suspension includes all school-sponsored activities and the activities no less than 1 calendar year unless it is changed by the director of schools. The LEA or public charter schools should encourage the prosecuting attorney that the court prohibit the defendant from attending school-sponsored events for a time the court finds appropriate for the sentence of the of the offense. Each LEA or public charter school must advise the assaulted employee of their rights as a result of the assault. This includes, but is not limited to, an employee's rights to file a report with the appropriate law enforcement agency. They should also support the employee in prosecuting of the student who committed the assault. If a student is suspended for committing an assault against an employee of the student's LEA or public charter and attends a school-sponsored activity, the LEA shall report it as public trespassing and additionally contact law enforcement for removal of the student. Ultimately and finally, no school employee should ever be in fear of returning to work. I renew my motion.
Representative Raper renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, I have a question regarding the school-sponsored events. And you've got the provision in here to be able to prosecute them for a violation of trespassing. However, my concern is school-sponsored events sometimes take place off-site, off-school grounds in public spaces. Is this bill meant to include school-sponsored events off-site?
Representative Raper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My intent is not off-site. That would be hard to regulate in and of itself. So on-site would be my answer to that.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you for clarifying that. I don't think the amended language of the bill specifies that. So as long as we have that on record, I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I'm out of order, but I have Matt Hopkins in the Westmoreland Student Council is here, the Westmoreland High School Student Council, and I think they've come in on one side of the gallery or the other. If y'all can stand up and please make them welcome. Thank you very much for being here today.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sorry to be out of order. My hand wasn't raised high enough in welcome and honoring, but I did want to honor my wife, Jennifer Thompson, who will have put up with this representative for 45 years as of this coming Sunday.
Any further discussion? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, in your bill, it says that the bill requires that the LEA and public charter school to support and assist the employee who was assaulted in prosecuting the case. So can you clarify what you mean by assisting in this endeavor?
Representative Raper.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. First of all, many times they're just left out on their own. And as far as assisting is concerned, is advising them of all their rights. And then if at that point, assisting them prosecution if it merits the case.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Please forgive me. I was reading the language of the bill. Could you say that again for clarity?
Representative Raper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's more of just assisting them and telling them that of what all their rights may be at this point and when the assault took place and what they can do, and also that the clarification would include legal ramifications that they have due process to.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So it's not your intent that in gathering evidence for the case to provide, to assist them in anything like that. This is more about letting them know what their rights are.
Representative Raper.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am. We're just trying to assist them and make sure that they don't feel like they're on an island alone, so that they're advised of all their rights.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, yield.
just help me out here. I thought the local systems pretty well had the flexibility, opportunity to make their own rules when it comes to these kind of issues in terms of dealing with, because each individual child in many cases may present a different scenario. So to make a rule a flat rule, is this a good idea, or should we just kind of leave it up to the directors?
Representative Raper.
Ultimately, this is left up to the directors on the final decision. My intent behind running this is we are losing so many teachers and other school employees to the teaching profession, and they're scared of returning to work because they're not really being supported the way they should be. So that's my intent.
Representative Shaw.
Well, thank you for that comment, but I think you just hit the nail on the head. And I guess I'm wondering why the local school directors are not supporting teachers when they're being threatened by students in such cases. I mean, why they're not doing that?
Representative Raper.
Truthfully, I can't answer that one, but I can say that sometimes it's a black eye on the system, and they want to try to get it by as quickly as possible. But I truly can't answer for them on that case.
Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, the object. Oh, Representative Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just had a quick question. As I was looking at this, how does this impact the students that have IEPs that may have some type of behavioral disorder, that act out physically and nonverbal?
Representative Raper. Representative.
May I repeat and make sure that I understood? Are you talking about when they have IEPs, and does this conflict? Is that your question?
Representative Dixie.
Yes.
Representative Raper.
This has in there where it will not do any violation of any federal law as far as this is concerned. So if they have a mandated amount of days, like it was 40 days, then they will adhere to that. That will not be, state law will not overturn federal law in this case.
Representative Dixie. Very good. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sponsor, I mentioned this one time before, I think in committee. One of my concerns is that I think the way the legislation reads, if the student is suspended and they have family or friends that are going to graduate at that same school, this bill prevents them from even attending the graduation, even though it's open to everybody else. So I have concerns about that, and didn't know if there was a possibility of addressing that. I know your bill's on the floor now, but just had concerns about that and wanted to.
Representative Raper.
I can answer your question. The bill does not necessarily address that, but I can tell you, I got clarification from legal about that because you asked that in committee, which is a very good question. But it's similar to a school restraining order where it's just no contact for that amount of time that they have been suspended.
Representative Love.
And thank you for checking into that. I still have concerns about that, but I do appreciate you checking into that. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, the objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2472, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any members change their vote? Vote aye. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 84, 14 nays.
House Bill 2472 and received the constitutional majority. I hereby declare it passed by objection. Most reconsider state. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 835 by Representative Ritchie and others relative to election integrity.
Representative Ritchie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 835 on third and final consideration.
Representative Ritchie moves passage following second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 2.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment replaces may compare with shall compare. Move to adopt.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of committee amendment number 2. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Ritchie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill in front of us requires the coordinator of elections to compare the statewide voter registration database against the Department of Safety to ensure that non-U.S. citizens are not registered to vote in the state of Tennessee. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Representative Ritchie renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Jones.
Thank you. First of all, this bill is a solution in search of a problem. It's about raising a myth of voter integrity, when really this is about trying to purge people from voting rolls. It's about voter suppression. And so this bill is a joke. It's a joke, and it's no coincidence that this is the first bill that they allow this member to bring up before us today. But my question to the sponsor is very simple. Representative Ritchie, would this legislation apply to representatives in this chamber? Say, for example, you had someone who represented Crossville but yet lived in Nashville. Would they be purged from the rolls?
Representative Ritchie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the question was partially a joke, seeing that this is a very substance bill. It's going to ensure that non-U.S. citizens, as long as a member, as I think you mentioned, Crossville, is a U.S. citizen, this bill will not do anything with that. What this bill simply does is it goes to the coordinator of elections and requires them to compare with the Department of Safety their database against the Tennessee voter registration database to ensure that non-U.S. citizens are not registered to vote in the state of Tennessee.
Representative Jones.
Do you honestly stand before us today and you're telling us that you believe that undocumented people are voting in the state of Tennessee? Do you believe this to be happening?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With this bill, it will ensure that anybody that is flagged by the Department of Safety will not be registered to vote in the state of Tennessee, is what the intent and what this is doing.
Representative Jones.
So I'll take that as a no. You don't believe this is happening. You just wanted to bring up something to raise fear-mongering about migrants, to raise fear-mongering about brown people, immigrants, with this mythology that you're trying to push before us. You did not say yes, so I take that as a no. Is that correct, Representative Ritchie?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do not know if there is or if there is not. The purpose of this legislation is to make sure that non-U.S. citizens who are not allowed to vote in the state of Tennessee, this will require the coordinator of elections to double check with the Department of Safety to make sure if there is anybody who is illegally voting in the state of Tennessee will be caught if they're inside of the Department of Safety. And that's simply all the bill does, Representative.
Representative Jones.
Thank you. Again, this bill is not about voter integrity. This is about voter suppression. Let's be honest about that. And it's very discouraging that we continue to put up people who are undocumented as punching bags to try and make them an issue when these are people who are taxpayers in our state, who are part of our community, and this is an issue that's not happening. So once again, we have useless legislation that is a solution in search of a problem, but that seems to be the pattern that we keep seeing before this body. So I know everyone's gonna clap, it's your first bill, but I hope that with your first and last bill, I wish we could do something to better the lives of Tennesseans and improve the lives of making voting easier in this state, increasing voter turnout, a state with one of the lowest voter turnouts. We should be looking at voter engagement, not voter suppression. This is a step in the wrong direction. And we know that this, voter suppression is the reason why we have the chamber looking the way it does. So again, I won't be supporting this bill. And I hope that we take seriously the issues of members of this body not actually living in their districts, because it's an actual issue happening right now in this chamber.
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You mentioned voter suppression. This bill does not do anything to that extent of voter suppression. What it does, it ensures that individuals that are not supposed to be voting are not going to be voting. There's no voter suppression inside of that. That's just ensuring that tools that we have at our disposal, such as the Department of Safety database, is being used to make sure that folks that are not supposed to be voting are not voting. So there's no intent for voter suppression. I would love more voters to be turning out and to be engaged, just like you're mentioning, but this bill does not do what you just articulated.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Ritchie, is this in fact your first bill?
Representative Ritchie.
It is.
Chairman
Thank you.
Faison.
Representative Ritchie, does this bill have anything to do with deer urine?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, this bill has nothing to do with deer urine. This bill has to do with ensuring that non-U.S. citizens are not voting here in the state of Tennessee.
Chairman Faison.
So what you're saying is the bill has nothing to do with conservation or hunting?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, unfortunately, a lot of those bills were squashed in the other chamber as they were going through. What this bill is intending to do, like I said, is make sure that we do have the most secure elections in the country and make sure that we get rid of any non-U.S. citizens that are registered to vote.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you're telling me this bill only has to do with elections?
Representative Ritchie.
That is correct.
Chairman Faison.
Well, that makes sense. This morning, I got a call from a little sixth grader at Grassy Fork Elementary. She was panicked. She heard about this bill, and she's running for student body president at Grassy Fork Elementary. And she heard that there were some of her opponents were having kids come from other public schools around there to work against her and vote against her. And they were actually going to vote in the sixth grade class president. And so am I understand that that's not going to happen?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Grassy Fork Elementary is a great elementary school. I've actually got a piece of property right down the road from there. We've driven past multiple times. This will not end up impacting those school elections as far as I'm aware. I do not believe the coordinator of elections has jurisdiction over Grassy Fork Elementary's student council races.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So are you trying to vote suppress the children from voting from other elementary schools in Grassy Fork?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would look forward to running a piece of legislation next year when I'm in the other chamber to make sure that that's not happening at Grassy Fork. But this particular bill will not end up doing that. This is just looking at Tennessee voter database.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Ritchie, is this in fact your last bill?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Time will tell on what's going to happen in the other chamber.
Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to congratulate you on your first potential last bill. Some others in the chamber will actually never know what it's like to be in the well. Congratulations, sir. Oh.
Representative Hardaway. Representative Hardaway. Sensitive. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. I think everything that needs to be said has been said, so I'm going to pass on this.
Chairman Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And sponsor of this bill is this shall compare change from may compare. It was shall compare up to a few years ago, and there was a changeover in systems or databases. And so the code reflected may compare at one time to keep in accordance with the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. It had been shall compare for several years. It was changed to may, and now you're bringing it back to shall because to keep up with compliance. Is that correct?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That is correct. It was shall for approximately 12 years. And in 2021, when the department was going through, there's another piece of legislation that Chairman Crawford ran, and the coordinator of elections was going through with that particular piece of legislation. Department of Safety had some technology updates, and to make sure that the coordinator of elections was able to make sure they stay compliance with the TCA laws, they end up changing it from shall to may, and we're going back the other direction now.
Chairman Doggett.
Very good. Thank you for that.
Representative Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Sponsor, I understand the intent of your legislation here. I have the honor of representing a very wonderfully diverse district here in Nashville. I have a lot of immigrants and second generation Tennesseans who are able to vote. My concern is what is the process here in doing this? And what I'm concerned about also is the unintended booting of people from the voter rolls just because they have similar names or things of that nature that might conflict with the system. So can you explain the process of how this is going to work? Because I really am afraid that it'll have unintended consequences of booting people who do have the lawful right to vote from the voter rolls in not only my district, but other districts that are as diverse as my own.
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the question. The current process, they compare that their social security numbers as well as name that's on there. If somebody is flagged as non-U.S. citizen in the Department of Safety's database, the coordinator of elections then sends notice to the individual and it goes to the county election office, and then they can remedy that. So if you do end up running across a inconsequential or unintended removal of somebody based off of this, there's notification to where they're able to make sure that that doesn't happen.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I mean, we have seen in the past, and this was an issue several years ago where our state was using a system that cross-checked with other states for people who had moved in and out of the state of Tennessee, and a lot of people got unintentionally booted off the voter rolls. So when we're looking at this from the standpoint of this piece of legislation, if people have the same or similar names and they go through there and it just so happens that that's the same or similar name on that database, are they going to first verify, take multiple steps to verify it's the same person or the accurate person before they boot that individual off the roll? And I also am concerned of how are they going to notify that individual of the potential for being booted so that that individual can correct them. Because, you know, we have a housing issue here in Nashville and other places across Tennessee. And so a lot of my residents move a lot, you know, 12-month leases, so forth. So I want to make sure they're actually going to be able to communicate with them, verify with them to make sure it's the right person, because I don't want people who have that lawful right unintentionally get booted off. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I believe you're referencing Tennessee Department of Homeland Security when it comes to like the DMV database checks, cross-reference as far as for addresses. That is a completely different process as far as for what ends up taking place. This is already happening. The may change into the word shall. Coordinator of Elections has ensured that he did not skip a beat whenever the language was changed back in 2021, that they've been doing this. This is just to ensure going forward that it is going to continue to keep happening. So there's no change of what has happened this past year or the following 2 years with this particular legislation. This is just to ensure that down the road, they're not going to end up taking it out, because currently it says the coordinator of elections may compare, and this is changing it back to shall.
Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I was actually referring the Secretary of State's office, the coordinator of elections. There was a nationwide system that had been set up for voter. It wasn't Homeland Security. It was separate. It was specifically for voter rights. But I appreciate you answering my question. I just want to, you know, emphasize my concerns about unintentional rejection of lawful voters. Thank you.
Representative Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are you mentioning the SAVE database? Is that what you're referencing, the SAVE? All right. Renew my motion. Thank you.
Let the record, let the journal reflect. Representative Dixie's excused. Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call previous question.
Previous question's been called. Is there objection? No objection. We're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 835 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does anyone wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 75, 22 nays.
House Bill 835 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2440 by Representative Sparks, relative to professions. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to take up House Bill 1922, item number 25 at this time.
Representative Sparks, you're recognized. Representative Sparks, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, that's item 4, House Bill 2440 by Representative Sparks.
Representative Sparks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute conform to House Senate Bill 2264.
Representative Sparks moves substitute and form Senate Bill 2264. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Sparks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of Senate Bill 2264 on third and final consideration.
Representative Sparks moves passage of Senate Bill 2264 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1, same as Senate Amendment number 2.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We're going to move to withdraw since it's the same as the Senate amendment.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Sparks, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, under House Bill 2440, if the following conditions are met, a former real estate agent would have their license reinstated. 1, payment of all back renewal fees owed, any penalty imposed by the commission resulting from a lapsed license. Number 2, submission and proof of completion of all classroom hours in real estate courses that have been required under Chapter 62-13-303 if the licensee had reinstated and instead maintained an active license during the period of temporary retirement. With that being said, I renew my motion.
Representative Sparks renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question on this great bill.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2264, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 2264, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most for consider table. Leader Lamberth, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to try this again. I'd make a motion at this time to take up item number 25, House Bill 1922.
Proper motion, probably second. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk, call up next bill.
Item 25, House Bill 1922, by Representative Butler and others, relative to voluntary surrender of an infant. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Butler, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1670.
Representative Butler moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 1670, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1670 on third and final consideration.
Representative Butler moves passage of Senate Bill 1670 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Butler, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation is primarily for rural areas, but it will expand the locations that a safe haven drop-off location, either for a baby box or for a face-to-face drop-off. It expands it to nursing homes in counties that do not have hospitals, which there are 21 counties that do not have a hospital, and it expands it to participating emergency communication centers. So with that, I will renew my motion and stand for questions.
Representative Butler renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1670, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, 1 nay, 4 present, on voting.
Senate Bill 1670, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most for serious table. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Brings the body back to item 5, House Bill 2464, by Representative Stevens, relative to substitute teachers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Stevens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2652.
Representative Stevens moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 2652, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 2652 on third and final consideration.
Representative Stevens moves passage of Senate Bill 2652 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw and defer to the sponsor for explanation.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Stevens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill originated with our Rutherford County School Board member, Frances Rosales. For those of you that serve on the K-12 committee, you heard her testimony about her experience serving as a substitute teacher in a different district. and she did not have adequate training for when she was faced with an emergency situation. And so this bill comes from that, and it requires that substitute teachers receive annual training in their local education board. And then also the bill clarifies this, that local LEAs are not allowed to hire substitute teachers that have a suspended license. And I renew my motion.
Representative Stevens renews his motion. Representative Fritz, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question on the bill.
Question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 2652, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 2652, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1698 by Representative Stevens, relative to threats against schools. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Stevens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1664.
Representative Stevens moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1664. Public second without objection. So ordered. Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1664 on third and final consideration.
Representative Stevens moves passage of Senate Bill 1664 on third and final consideration. Public second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Amendment 1 by Representative Powell, Mr. Speaker, was timely filed.
Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I spoke with the sponsor about this amendment prior to. And while I actually agree, I think when someone calls in a threat like this, they should have their driver's license suspended. I wanted to point out that I think even more importantly is that when someone calls in a threat like this, they should have their lose the ability to possess weapons and guns. So that's the point of my amendment, is to make it so that when someone calls a juvenile, they call in one of these threats, that in addition to losing their license, they would also not be able to possess a firearm. However, I'm aware of the fact that juveniles under Tennessee code are not allowed currently to possess firearms as it is. I would like to point out, though, that we've also recently enhanced the penalties that makes calling in those threats potentially a felony. However, the situation could arise where someone is still a juvenile, calls in a threat, and then ends up, after they become 18, ending up possessing a firearm. So, we need to think carefully about any time somebody calls in a threat to a school, making sure that those individuals are not allowed to possess firearms. But understanding this deals specifically with juveniles, and having spoken to the sponsor about this, I will move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Stevens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill also originated with one of our school board members, Tammy Sharp, and we were talking about ways to help deter these threats against schools. And one of the ideas was that if a juvenile is convicted of this crime, that part of the penalty is that the offender would lose his or her driver's license for 1 year. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Stevens renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Capley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question been called. There's objection. We're on the board. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 75, 21 nays.
Previous question prevails. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1664 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 91, 3 nays, 3 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 1664, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1664 by Representative Warner, relative to law enforcement at schools. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Warner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1715.
Representative Warner moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1715 without objection. So ordered. Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1715 members authorizes law enforcement agency to assign at least one law enforcement officer to serve as a school officer, SRO, at a school if the school board of that local LEA is not entered into a memorandum of understanding. With this law enforcement agent requires the chief of the law enforcement that is assigned to the law enforcement officer to notify and provide certain information to that school officials. Members, we passed this bill back in the special session. It did not get taken up in the other house. My great friend from Murray County carried this bill back then, and this is the same bill. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion. I'll move passage for third and final consideration.
Representative Warner moves passage of Senate Bill 1715 on third and final consideration. By second, Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
Mr. Speaker, no amendments filed.
Representative Warner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Representative Warner renews his motion. Representative Hardaway, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. To the sponsor, on those who are permitted to carry would include any staff?
Representative Warner.
No, sir, it wouldn't be any staff. It would be a SRO officer provided by the local sheriff department or police department.
Representative Hardaway.
So there's still the requirement for post-certification.
Representative Warner.
Absolutely, sir.
Representative Hardaway.
Give us a two-word summary of how this differs from current law.
Representative Warner.
Under current law, I'm not sure this is a memorandum of understanding. If there is not a memorandum of understanding in place, this would allow the local sheriff's department or the local police jurisdiction to place a member in there.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you, Speaker.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, if I'm reading the legislation correctly, it says that if a memorandum of understanding is not established at each school, so if you have a school district and they have a memorandum of understanding at the high schools, the middle schools, but not the elementary schools, then this particular piece of legislation then says they can send an SRO to the elementary schools.
Representative Warner.
I think the sheriff or the local police department has that determination whether they want to put an officer in there or not.
Representative Love.
Okay. My only concern is that we would have a situation where even though the school district may be working out a memorandum at the elementary school, they have one at the high school, have one at the middle school, and may be in process of working one out in the elementary school. I would hate to see a situation where there's someone sent there and they don't find out about that until that morning.
Representative Warner.
Could you repeat that? I couldn't hear you.
Representative Love.
Are the people too loud? Is that what you're saying? So I'm saying that if you have a memorandum at the high school and middle school, but not the elementary school, and they may be trying to work one out, my concern would be that an SRO is sent there and they don't find out until that morning. Is there any time frame with which they're to notify the school district or the principal that someone's coming to the school?
Representative Warner.
I don't think this bill addresses a timeline. It just says that a sheriff or local police jurisdiction may place an officer in there. And I do, Representative, believe that we need, at this day and time, we need a officer in every school.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, sponsor.
Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, come back to me after Gloria if you have her on the list. Is she on the list?
Not after you, but she's on the list. Oh. If you like to pass, we can go to the next person.
Yeah, pass and come back to me if you don't mind, please.
Representative Martin of Hamilton.
Mr. Speaker, I move the previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection to the question? There's objection to the question. We're on the board. All those in favor of previous question vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 71, 24 nays.
Previous question prevails. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1715, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 86, 10 nays.
Senate Bill 1715, having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare it passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd make a motion we take up item number 22, House Bill 1375 at this time.
Proper motion, Bobby seconded, without objection. So ordered. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that's item 22, House Bill 1375 by Chairman Reagan, relative to the Tennessee Historical Commission. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1142.
Chairman Reagan moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1142. Properly seconded, without objection. So ordered. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1142 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reagan moves passage of Senate Bill 1142 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1, similar to Senate Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is similar to the Senate amendment. I defer to the sponsor for further explanation. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill is amended, reconstitutes the Historical Commission by allowing appointments from the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Speaker of the Senate, reduces the size so that it's easier for them to get a forum. Additionally, it accepts the Senate version, which has language to retain the executive director until a replacement can be found, and adds a deadline for making new appointments to August 31st of this year. With that explanation, I renew my motion.
Chairman Reagan renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1142, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 71, 22 nays.
Senate Bill 1142, having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Make a motion to take up House Bill 2182, item number 24 at this time.
Proper motion, Bobby second, without objection. So ordered. Representative Kumar, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's slightly out of order, but I wanted to thank Representative Dixie for acknowledging my last legislative assistant's birthday. But it is important that I wish her a happy birthday also. She's an exceptional young lady, and she deserves a great round of applause. Thank you.
Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Item 24, House Bill 2182 with Chairman White, relative to qualified data centers.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 2182 on third and final consideration.
Chairman White moves passes. Bobby second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1.
Vice Chairman Baum, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Vice Chairman Baum moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Bobby seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of committee number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what we're doing with this particular bill is we're just restructuring one of our major corporations in Tennessee, FedEx, putting that in line, and I renew my motion, and I can explain if it's requested by the members.
Chairman White renews the motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you explain, please?
Chairman White.
Yes, sir. In 2007, our FedEx Corporation, which is home in Memphis and a great corporation for Tennessee, they were structured or restructured into 10 separate entities. You had the FedEx Corporation, and then you had entities like FedEx Express, FedEx Ground, FedEx Freight, FedEx Services. And during that time under FedEx Services, they incorporated what is known as a qualified data center, which gave them a tax-exempt status under this particular entity. Today, they are restructuring all these entities back into one corporation, which is now called the FedEx Express Corporation. And so since they had those tax exempt structures under that entity and they're rolling back in that, this just makes it where they continue to have that same exemption.
All right. Representative McKenzie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've heard it's my fourth year here. I think every year there's some kind of break for FedEx. Fuel tax, now they changed their mind how they're organizing. We're giving them a break. Why are we giving FedEx so many tax breaks? I hear you saying they're a good citizen. I know they're a good employer, but why exactly do we probably annually, we probably have an annual FedEx tax break. So why is that?
Chairman White.
Thank you. And we're not changing anything. This has been around since 2007. They're restructuring. We're just making sure the same restructuring continues. But FedEx is one of our major corporations. Memphis, over 30,000 employees. And then, you know how they do it worldwide. They bring in a lot of money. In 2022, they paid $67 million in F&E taxes, sales taxes, aviation jet fuel taxes. So a great corporation. We're just continuing this particular exemption.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you. I don't disagree that they're a great corporation. Fred Smith came up with a huge concept, and he has remained there in Memphis. But at some point, I mean, okay, 67 million out of billions of dollars made, billions and billions and billions. I do get that we want to incentivize our companies to stay, but I think this is getting to be a little much. And this really isn't for you, but it's the FedEx. Quit asking. At some point, I'll say this, we are a business-friendly state. We don't overtax our businesses. This breaking up of companies and then bringing back the companies is going to end up being a tax break for Federal Express Corporation. They're going to pay less after this bill than they paid before this bill as it relates to their data centers and whatnot. So again, this is another tax break for FedEx. Okay, and we discussed, you can shake your head no, but we discussed that in committee. When they're coming back, they're paying less, reorganized. They changed the rates. So again, I'll just ask you all to consider telling them no. I get that they're a vital part of West Tennessee economy and business, but at some point we have to start saying no. Thank you, thank you, sponsor.
Chairman White.
Thank you. And let me just point out this. The reason they're not getting any new tax break, they're just restructuring, making sure it continues on. But the reason they had this, they invested $100 million and employed so many people to create a data processing center. And like any qualified data center, you get that tax break. So we're just continuing something on that they've been continuing with this restructuring. I renew my motion.
Representative Towns.
There's a little hate aid on the floor today. Coming from East Tennessee, I would imagine. If you were so fortunate to have FedEx in your location and in your locale, 30,000 jobs plus, you'd feel like you drank Red Bull and you had wings, okay? Settle down. I used to work there too, like you may have too one day. But the deal of it is, it's a great corporation. They're restructuring, they bring in, and just think about, you know, it's been all broken up. And when I was there, it was all together as one company, okay? And they divided into all these different companies. So the structure is that they restructured it as it was originally, okay? Now, whatever tax breaks that they may garner, gonna be tax breaks that are already on the books. Nothing new, okay? And not only members, FedEx, you know, don't just take care and bless Memphis, Tennessee. It blesses the whole state with employment for people across this state. And we need more. I wish you had a company like that, and I did too, to make those contributions. But the fact of it is that, you know, I'm with you. There has to be some balance, as you're saying, my leader. But the fact of it is, I don't think this is one to fit that bill in description because it's restructuring them as they were when I managed there years ago. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for the question.
The question's been called. Is there objection? There's objection. We're on the board. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 79, 13 nay, 2 present, unvoted.
Previous question prevails. We're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 2182 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, 6 nays, 2 present, unvoted.
House Bill 2182 and received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that brings the body back to item 8. House Bill 2635, the Leader Camper, relative to contraception access. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1919.
Leader Camper moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1919. Probably seconded without objections to order. Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move passage of Senate Bill 1919 on third and final consideration.
Leader Camper moves passage of Senate Bill 1919 on third and final consideration. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, it's similar to Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the same as Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, what this bill does is simple. It enables Tennesseans on TennCare to obtain a 12-month refill on birth control from a health benefit plan and provides for coverage if of hormonal health care, birth certificate, birth control. It also makes it easier for Tennesseans, particularly those in healthcare deserts, to get access to birth control. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll take any questions from members.
Leader Camper, renew. Leader Camper.
I renew my motion.
There we go. Leader Camper renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1919, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88 nays, 5 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 1919, I received a constitutional majority. I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Call next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1846 by Chairman Clemens, relative to reporting on firearm injuries and deaths. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1657.
Representative Clemens moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 1657. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1657 on third and final consideration.
Representative Clemens moves passage of Senate Bill 1657 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of Committee Amendment number 1. Probably second. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Clemens, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What this legislation simply does is require the Department of Health to submit an annual report to the governor detailing the total number of firearm injuries and deaths caused by firearms in this state per 100,000 people that occurred in the previous calendar year. That I renew my motion.
Representative Clemens renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1657 has been vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 58, 28 nays, 4 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 1657 has received a constitutional majority. Everybody declare passed by objection. Most read is tabled. Let the journal reflect Representative Pearson's excuse. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1859 by Representative Davis relative to occupational licensing.
Representative Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I forgot my glasses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1859 on third and final consideration.
Representative Davis moves passage. Popular second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, so we're going to move to adopt and ask the sponsor to give us further explanation.
Chairman Vaughn moves adoption of committee amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of committee number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In some states, the licensing laws will unnecessarily keep some folks with criminal records out of jobs and prevent willing employers from hiring them. Tennessee recognized this problem, and in 2018, due to our illustrious majority chair, he enacted the Fresh Start Act, in which that held several important reforms, and it helped give people with criminal records a fair chance for a fresh start in licensed work. And so what we're doing is we're essentially updating this. When a licensing department or agency declines a license, what we're asking for with this legislation is that they, in the response to the applicant, that they don't use vague terms for the reason as denial. So we don't want them to use vague terms such as good moral character or character and fitness, because we want those individuals to be able to understand clearly the reason for the denial, and in some cases maybe work towards correcting that denial so that then they can reapply. And with that, I stand ready for any questions, and I move for passage.
Representative Davis renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Davis, I just want to applaud you on your growth. There's a marked difference between the legislation you're bringing this year and the legislation you brought last year. I just think you're bringing great legislation this year, and I want to applaud you on it. So, and I'm supporting it now. I want to sign on, but I don't want to sink your bill. So I'll try to sneak and sign on last. But thank you for this bill. It's a good bill.
Representative Powell.
I did have one question about this. So if individuals have committed fraud in the past, I know there's a list of exemptions. Can you speak to how fraud would apply to this?
Representative Davis.
So the moral turpitude and some of those crimes that have to do with mens rea with intent, they are still, this doesn't change any of that. This legislation doesn't. What that does is those licensing agencies still have, if there's any sort of crime that individual has been convicted of, then those licensing agencies can deny that license. They can either deny it or create a conditional license. But this legislation doesn't speak to that. We're only saying that when those denials occur, that those letters are sent to those individuals, that there's clear language that those individuals can understand the reason for their denial.
Representative Powell, you're good. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker. And thank you, sponsor, for the bill. I think it makes sense. I think having a full explanation will not only allow the applicant to be able to focus on what they need to change, what they need to improve, but it will also cause the employer, the prospective employer, to have to reevaluate how they look at their criteria, because they'll have to rethink, is this really relevant to the job that the employee is going to do? And it's going to result in better employee-employer matchups and better productivity. So I applaud you for the bill, And I'm signing off.
Representative Davis.
And I appreciate that. One of the other things too is it helps to clarify in the applicant's mind how they can approve or improve their application in the future. So that way they're using the correct terminology, that they're including all mitigating factors, so that way there's a clear picture of who that individual is. It's not just what they've done in their past, but who they are at present.
Representative Sparks.
Thank you. Members, a lot of us were at Men of Valor yesterday and heard a lot of testimony. And a lot of these guys have had second chances. Many of us have had second chances. You know, a lot of us made mistakes when we were younger in our teen years. We've got a huge workforce development problem, as everyone knows. If your legislation can help alleviate some of that, step in the right direction, I appreciate you having the courage and conviction with a piece of legislation like this. Thank you, Representative Davis.
Representative Davis.
I just want to strongly emphasize Men of Valor is an excellent program, and so I appreciate you mentioning them. They are truly doing God's work. Thank you, sir.
Representative Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Call for the previous question.
This question been called. Is there objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1859 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
House Bill 1859 having a constitutional majority, hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider table. Representative Doggett, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I'm out of order, but Representative Capley and I have a group here from Lawrence County, Sacred Heart of Lawrenceburg up to our left. They're visiting with us today. We're so grateful to have them. Help me welcome them to the General Assembly.
Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that we take up the House message calendar at this time.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we roll the balance of today's calendar to the next available space, next available calendar.
Proper motion, properly seconded. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that we take up the message calendar, today's message calendar at this time.
Call up next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, House Bill 843 by Representative Lynn relative to higher education. Mr. Speaker, on March 28, 2024, the Senate lifted the tabling motion, reconsidered its action in passing House Bill 843, adopted Amendment 2, and passed House Bill 843 as amended.
Representative Lynn, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The amendment that we sent back over to be added is a severability clause, so I move to concur in the Senate amendments of 1 and 2.
Representative Lynn moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1 and 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on amendment? Representative Clemens.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ms. Lynn, can you briefly explain how this affects the overall bill?
Representative Lynn.
It is simply the addition of a severability clause so that if anyone sues and any part of the bill is to be found to be unconstitutional, only that part of the bill would be stricken.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is regard to the Age Appropriate Materials Act, correct?
Representative Lynn.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1 and 2, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member voted, does any member wish to change their vote? Take the vote, Mr. Clerk.
Ayes 76, 18 nays.
Senate Amendment number 1 and 2, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it concurred in without objection. Most reconsider table. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1625 by Chairman Zachary and others relative to mental illness. Mr. Speaker, on March 28, 2024, the Senate substituted House Bill 1625 for Senate Bill 1673, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 1625 as amended.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the change in the Senate is simply that the mental health practitioner, if they do commit the patient, that discharges them from the duty to warn. So with that, I move to concur in Senate Amendment 1.
Chairman Zachary moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 76, 12 nays, 5 present, not voting.
Senate Amendment number 1, having received a constitutional majority, hereby declare concurred in without objection. Most reconsider tabled. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1754 by Chairman Reagan relative to Department of General Services. Mr. Speaker, on March 28, 2024, the Senate refused to proceed in its adoption of Amendment number 1.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to refuse to recede from our action and non-concurring with Senate Amendment number 1, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies.
Chairman Reagan moves to refuse to recede from our action and non-concurring in Senate Amendment 1, and that a conference committee be appointed to confer with a like committee from the Senate to resolve the differences between the two bodies. Properly seconded. Without objection, the motion carries. I appoint the following members: Representative Reagan, Reedy, Towns, Crawford, and Burkhart. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1909 by Representative Bolso relative to weapons. Mr. Speaker, on March 28, 2024, the Senate substituted House Bill 1909 for Senate Bill 1868, adopted Amendment 1, passed House Bill 1909 as amended.
Representative Bolso, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, you will recall that this is the bill that allows college students and other adults to possess non-lethal weapons on campuses for purposes of self-defense. The Senate amendment simply gives the act a name. It names the act the Lake and Riley Act of 2024. I move to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Bolso moves to concur in Senate Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could you tell us who that was again, who this person is? Did you name it after?
Representative Bolso.
Tell us something about him.
Please repeat the question.
Leader Camper.
I'm sorry. I was saying, could you tell us who this person is you're naming this after?
Representative Bolso.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Lake and Riley was a young lady who was jogging on the University of Georgia campus in Athens, Georgia on February the 22nd of this year and was brutally murdered on campus by someone who was in the country illegally. We originally filed this bill, Leader Camper, on January 22nd to protect all college students on our public colleges and universities. And because of the nature of the brutal slaying to which Lake and Riley was subjected on February the 22nd, the Senate sponsor and I mutually decided to name it in her honor and in her memory. She lived a beautiful life, but it was all too short, and that was the reason for the change.
Leader Camper. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. We're voting. All those in favor of Senate Amendment number 1, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 88, 4 nays.
Senate Amendment number 1, having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare concurred in without objection. Most reconsider table. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 2676 by Chairman Williams relative to the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. On March 28, 2024, the Senate substituted House Bill 2676 for Senate Bill 2713, adopted Amendment 1, and passed House Bill 2676 as amended.
Chairman Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Senate amendment is just not tenable, and so I move to non-concur with Senate Amendment number 1.
Without objection, we non-concur. Next message, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes the message calendar.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Unfinished business.
Unfinished business. Representative Martin O'Carroll.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw H.R. 145 from committee and House.
You heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Chairman Faison, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the rules be suspended for immediate introduction, consideration of House Joint Resolution 1326.
Mr. Clerk, please read the caption.
House Joint Resolution 1326 by Chairman Faison and others, a resolution to commend Representative John Holsclaw for his honorable and astute service to the people of Tennessee as a member of the House of Representatives.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Chairman Faison.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move adoption of House Joint Resolution 1326.
Chairman Faison moves adoption of House Joint Resolution 1326, properly seconded. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Joint Resolution 1326 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare adopted without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move to Suspend the rules for the immediate consideration of SJR 1377.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
Senate Joint Resolution 1377 by Leader Camper, a resolution to honor and congratulate Gwendolyn Hill Vincent on the celebration of her 90th birthday.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objection, the rules are suspended. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 1377.
Leader Camper moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 1377, properly seconded. Any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare it concurred in without objection. The motion reconsider is tabled. Leader Lambert, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that after conferring with the minority leader, I move that House Bill 2147 be heard in the Commerce Committee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 2433 be heard in the Finance, Ways, and Means Subcommittee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 2269 be heard in the Government Operations Committee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that House Bill 2984 be heard in the Local Government Committee next week.
You've heard the motion. Any objections? Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House Bill 1906, substitute for Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Monday's message calendar. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, I'm directed to return to the House Bill 2685, substituted for the Senate bill on the same subject, amended and passed by the Senate.
Monday's message calendar. Any further unfinished business? Unfinished business? Representative Hardaway.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure. I need to get on the record on why I voted no against the Israel resolution, and I need to know the proper path for that.
That's a parliamentary inquiry. You can come up here and they can discuss it with you. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the parliamentary inquiry was concerning explanation of a member's vote. Rule 30, explanation of a vote. Any member may have written into the journal an explanation of such member's vote on any particular motion, resolution, or bill by presenting to the clerk an appropriate explanation in typewritten form. However, an oral explanation is not a matter of privilege and shall not be allowed from the floor.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Announcements.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized. Well, we'll come back. Chairman Holsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Criminal Justice Full will meet Wednesday morning at 11 a.m. in room 1, 11 a.m. room 1 Wednesday.
Chairman Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Finance, Ways, and Means Subcommittee will meet Wednesday at 11 a.m. House Hearing Room 3. Thank you.
Chairman Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've got a twofold announcement. One being that for those of you who are interested in watching the highest rated House committee conclude its business, it will be done at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. The House Commerce Committee, longest running show in the business. So y'all tune in. We got a cliffhanger, a big finale waiting on you. And then the last thing is I would be remiss, I forgot to announce that today is my youngest child's birthday. My boy Grayson turned 29 years old today. That's how old I am. And I know he probably won't watch this, but his mother would be very upset if I didn't mention it. So anyway, happy birthday, Gravy.
Representative Davis.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to mention that Tennessee Highway Patrol Captain Stacy Heatherly was in a crash on Tuesday when she was responding to Morgan County to some of the tornadoes. And Captain Heatherly is just a wonderful person, and I've just kind of gotten to know her from being up here, and so I just want us to have her in our prayers. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Crawford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House Local Government Committee's final calendar will be on Tuesday, April the 16th. The deadline to place your bills on notice will be Wednesday, April the 10th at 3:30 p.m. Thank you, sir.
Chairman Doggett. Chairman Doggett, did you have anything?
Oh, no, sir.
No. Very good. Chairman Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the House Government Operations Committee is changing our meeting time for Monday. We'll be meeting at 1 p.m. on Monday instead of our normal time, 1:30. Again, House Government Operations Committee will meet at 1 p.m. on Monday, April the 8th in House Hearing Room 1. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chairman White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And for the House Education Administration Committee, we're going to meet Wednesday at 2:30. Wednesday at 2:30 and hope to complete business. Thank you.
Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Civil Justice Full Committee will meet Tuesday at 10:30 a.m. in House Hearing Room 1.
Any further announcements? Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 93 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
That completes the regular order, Mr.
Leader
Speaker.
Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House stand in recess until 3 p.m. on Monday, April 8th, 2024.
Without objection, the House stands in recess till 3 p.m. on Monday, April 8th, 2024.